I was never the best student in her class. Not the worst either. Just somewhere in the vague middle, floating between average grades and missed deadlines, trying to get by without drawing too much attention. But Professor Lane wasn't the type to let people disappear in the background. She had eyes like searchlights, cold, clear, and always moving. And if you slacked off, if you skipped a reading or turned in something half-baked, she noticed. She always noticed. Her class was required for my degree, Advanced Literature and Narrative Structures. The name sounded poetic, but the workload was brutal. Essays every other week, pop analyses, mandatory seminar discussions. Professor Lane didn't hand out grades. She made you earn them. And after midterms, I was dangerously close to failing. It didn't help that she was intimidating in every possible way. Early 40s, maybe older. Tall, graceful, with sharp features and an ever-present pair of thin-rimmed glasses that she wore low on her nose. Her wardrobe was minimalist and elegant. Monochrome blouses, high-waisted slacks, pointed flats. No jewelry, no makeup, just clean lines and quiet power. Her voice never rose above a controlled tone, but when she spoke, everyone listened. I wasn't afraid of her exactly, but she made me feel seen. Not in the usual way, not like other professors who barely learned your name. With her, it felt like she could read thoughts you hadn't even had yet. And the worst part was, I couldn't tell if she disliked me or was just watching, studying. By the second week of April, I knew I was in trouble. I'd missed one essay deadline entirely. The second was submitted rushed, barely spell-checked. The class average was already tanking, and she'd made it clear during the last lecture that she didn't believe in rescue grades. You either kept up or you didn't. So when I got her email, "Please stay after Thursday's session. I'd like to speak with you regarding your progress," my stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. Thursday arrived with that weird April weather. Sunny but cold, breezy with streaks of white cloud overhead. I sat through the entire 90-minute seminar trying not to sink into the seat. We were discussing unreliable narrators in modern fiction, but I couldn't focus. Every time Professor Lane walked past my row, her heels tapping against the tile, I felt her shadow flick across my desk like a warning. When the session ended, everyone filtered out slowly. She didn't look at me, not at first. She just started organizing papers at her desk while the students mumbled their goodbyes and shoved laptops into bags. I stayed seated. My palms were slightly sweaty. When the door clicked shut behind the last student, she finally spoke. "Mr. Ellis." I stood awkwardly. "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes flicked up from the papers. "Do you know why you're here?" I nodded. "My last 2 essays. And the one you never submitted?" I exhaled. "That one too." She closed the folder and rested her hands on top of it. "I don't tolerate apathy in my classroom." "It's not apathy," I said too quickly. "Just bad time management. Personal stuff." Her brow lifted slightly. "Personal things don't excuse academic failure." "I know," I muttered. There was a long pause. Then she stood from her desk, slowly, and walked around to the front. She didn't sit. Instead, she leaned back against the desk, arms folded, and looked directly at me over the rim of her glasses. "You know, you're not unintelligent," she said. "Thanks." That wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. She adjusted her glasses slightly. "You write with instinct. You analyze without knowing you're analyzing, which means there's potential. But I don't reward potential. I grade performance." I nodded. I wasn't sure what else to do. "You're a senior, yes?" "Yeah." "Which means this class is required for your graduation." "Yeah." She stared at me for another second, and then slowly lowered her glasses to the tip of her nose. Her expression shifted, just slightly, not warmer, not colder, but more focused. And then came the words I didn't expect. You really want to pass that badly? I blinked. There was something in her tone, measured, ambiguous, almost challenging. The words hung in the space between us, suspended. The question wasn't about academics anymore. At least not entirely. I swallowed. Yes, I do. She let that answer hang, then raised her glasses again with a quiet, practiced motion and turned back toward her desk. Then I suggest you be here tomorrow evening, she said. After hours, you'll rewrite both essays from scratch. Under my supervision. I hesitated. Tomorrow's Friday, and I'm doing you a favor, she replied without looking back. I expect your full attention. 7 sharp. I nodded again. Yes, ma'am. She didn't say goodbye, just waved me off with one hand as she reopened her folder. I stepped out of the classroom, heart thudding a little faster than it should have. It wasn't just the deadline or the assignment. It was the question, the way she'd said it. You really want to pass that badly? I wasn't sure what she meant by it, but I was starting to wonder if she wanted me to. The hallway outside her classroom felt colder than it should have. I walked back to my apartment with a strange weight in my chest. Not anxiety exactly, but not relief either. It was like something had been opened, and I didn't know how to close it. I kept replaying that moment in my head. The way she lowered her glasses, the deliberate calm in her voice when she said, "You really want to pass that badly?" It wasn't the words. It was the delivery. There was a challenge in it. A test. I spent most of the next day pretending to be productive. I opened a blank document and tried to outline ideas for the essays, but nothing stuck. I kept checking the time, feeling restless, like I was waiting for something I couldn't name. I thought about not going, thought about sending an email and saying I'd handle the rewrite on my own. But part of me didn't want to avoid whatever this was. Maybe it was the same part that had noticed how she walked, how she spoke, how she looked at me like she already knew what I was going to say next. By 6:45 p.m., I was outside the humanities building, watching the last flickers of daylight fade behind the trees. Most of the campus was empty. The doors were technically locked after hours, but I knew the side entrance near the basement vending machines would still be open. Her classroom was dark when I arrived, but her office wasn't. The door was open just slightly, warm light spilling out into the hall. I knocked once, and she looked up from her desk, glasses perched low as always. "Right on time," she said. "Come in." I stepped inside. Her office was neater than I expected. Shelves lined with books, a tall lamp glowing softly in the corner, and a ceramic teapot on a tray near the window. The blinds were half drawn. It didn't feel like a classroom. It felt private. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I obeyed. "Here's the assignment," she continued, sliding a folder across the desk. 2 prompts. You'll choose one, and you'll write it here now. No distractions. No internet. Just you and your thoughts. I opened the folder. One prompt was on narrative structure in Faulkner. The other was on layered meaning in Toni Morrison's Beloved. "Take your pick," she said, pouring herself tea. I hesitated. "Do I get tea too?" She looked at me over her cup. "That depends. Are you going to behave like a student or a guest?" I'm not sure which one gets better treatment. A small smirk played at the corner of her lips. Neither. I treat both with caution. I nodded slowly and picked the Faulkner prompt. "I'll take this one." She sipped her tea. "Good. Laptop." I placed it on the desk. She slid it toward herself and typed something in, disabling the Wi-Fi. Then she handed it back. "You have 2 hours. Begin." I stared at the screen for a minute, trying to find a thread of thought. She didn't leave the room. She just continued reading something on paper, occasionally glancing over the rim of her glasses, like a quiet sentinel. Her presence was distracting in a way that made it hard to focus. Not because she was doing anything overt, but because I could feel her. The way you feel someone when you know they're watching without watching. After 20 minutes of typing, I looked up. "You always supervise like this?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Only when I suspect the student needs more than academic discipline." Meaning, now she did look at me. "You strike me as someone who drifts when no one is holding the wheel." I leaned back slightly. "And what are you doing, steering?" She tilted her head. "Testing." My throat felt dry. "Testing what?" She set her paper down. "Your limits." The room went still. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. She stood from her chair and walked around the desk. Slowly. Her steps weren't loud, but I heard them anyway. She didn't sit, just leaned slightly on the edge of the table beside me. "How badly do you want to pass, Mr. Ellis?" I turned in my seat to look at her. "You already asked me that." "No," she said, her voice quieter now. "Before, I asked the version you could laugh off." She removed her glasses slowly, folded them, and placed them on the desk behind her. "This is the version you answer honestly." I swallowed. "Yes, I want to pass." "Enough to be here after hours?" "Yes." "Enough to sit across from someone you don't understand and trust that she knows exactly what she's doing?" There was a beat, a silence that felt like a held breath between us. "Yes." Her gaze didn't shift, but something in it changed. Not softer, just deeper. "Good," she said finally, standing upright. "Then finish your work. I'll review it when you're done." She turned and walked back to her side of the desk. The spell broke, but not completely. I stared back down at my screen, heart thudding. The cursor blinked on an empty line, but all I could think about was the fact that she had taken off her glasses. And for the first time since this class began, I wasn't sure what the assignment even was anymore. I wrote, or at least tried to. My fingers moved across the keys, but the words didn't come easily. Every few minutes I found myself glancing up, watching her across the desk. She didn't speak, didn't interrupt, just read silently, her eyes flicking over the pages in front of her as if I wasn't there. But she knew I was watching. That was the thing. She always knew. I finished the first 1,000 words somewhere around the 1 hour mark. It wasn't my best work, but it was better than anything I'd submitted in the past 2 months. Probably because I was terrified. Probably because I was intrigued. Probably because she had said those words again with more weight this time. "How badly do you want to pass?" And I had answered. Honestly. At 8:45, she checked the clock. "Time's up," she said, rising from her chair. I looked up. "Can I just finish this last sentence?" "No," she said simply. "Submit what you have." I hit save, closed the laptop, and handed it across the desk. She took it gently, her fingers grazing mine for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Sit," she said, nodding toward the chair again. "I was sitting," I said, half smiling. She didn't return it. "Sit like someone who's waiting for an evaluation." That shut me up. I leaned back. She opened the file and started reading. Not scanning, reading. Line by line, paragraph by paragraph. I watched her eyes move across the screen, watched the way her jaw tightened slightly at certain sentences, the way her lips pressed together when something seemed to register. I felt more exposed than I had in years. Then, about halfway through, she paused. "Interesting," she murmured. "What?" "You write about repression with surprising clarity," she said, not looking at me. "You understand what it means to hold something back, to let it sit just beneath the surface. Is that bad?" She looked at me. It's telling. She turned the laptop toward me and pointed at a line. This paragraph here, you're not talking about Faulkner anymore. I leaned forward. It was the part where I'd written. The narrator never admits what he wants, but every action betrays it. The silence isn't passive. It's charged. It's deliberate. He doesn't need to say it out loud, because the space between words is louder than the words themselves. She tapped the screen once. This isn't literary analysis. This is personal. I swallowed. Maybe. She studied me for a long moment, then leaned back and crossed her legs slowly, deliberately. You don't need to be afraid of being understood, she said. It's not always dangerous, says the person doing the understanding, I replied, trying to steady my voice. That made her smile. Finally, you're sharper than you let on, she said. Maybe I just need the right pressure. Her eyes flickered. Another pause. A slow breath. Then she stood. I'll give you partial credit for this, she said. Not because it's complete, but because you stopped pretending. I blinked. Is that the assignment now? Honesty. It always was, she said. You were just too busy performing to notice. She walked to the shelf behind her desk and took a small folder off the top. Then she turned back to me and placed it gently in front of where I was sitting. I want you to come back Monday. Same time. There's more to discuss. I frowned. About the essay? No, she said. About the silence between sentences. I stared at her. She moved to the window, pulling one slat of the blind aside and looking out at the empty quad below. Her back to me, her posture calm, controlled. Then her voice came again, low level but not cold. You do want to pass, don't you? I do. Then understand this isn't about grades anymore. I stood slowly, the chair legs creaking against the tile. She didn't turn. I picked up the folder. I'll be here Monday. I know, she said. I waited a second longer, expecting her to say something else. But she didn't, so I left. The hallway was dark now, the lights on motion sensors flickering on one by one as I walked. The building felt empty in a way I hadn't noticed before, like the whole place had exhaled after I stepped out. Outside, the air was crisp and quiet. I stood for a while beneath the tall oak tree by the steps, folder in hand, heartbeat louder than the wind. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Whatever this was, it had already started. And somehow I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. I didn't tell anyone about Monday. Not my roommate, not my friends, not even the group chat I usually ignored. It wasn't out of guilt. It was something else, like if I spoke about it, I'd break whatever fragile thread was holding the whole thing together. The folder she gave me had only 2 pages inside. One was a printout of my last failed essay, heavily marked, red pen cutting through sentences, questions in the margins. The other was blank except for a single line written at the top in her precise, clean handwriting. Write something true. That was it. Not rewrite your analysis. Not finish your paper. Just write something true. I stared at that line for hours that weekend. Not because I didn't know what to write, but because I knew exactly what she was asking. And I wasn't sure I was ready to put it down. Monday came. I arrived early, sat outside her office, folder in hand, staring at the number plate on her door like it might blink or change. At 6:59 p.m., the door opened. Come in, she said. Her voice was calm. As always, I stepped inside. She wasn't behind the desk this time. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, wearing a long black sweater over a gray blouse. Casual but still perfectly composed. The lights were dimmer tonight, just the desk lamp and the orange glow of the hallway spilling through the frosted glass. Sit, she said, gesturing toward the chair I'd used last time. I handed her the folder. She didn't open it. Not right away. Did you write it? I did. Is it true? I nodded. More than anything else I've written this year. She looked at me for a second longer, then sat at the desk and flipped open the folder. She read in silence. 3 pages. No paragraphs. Just a single, flowing narrative about failure, pressure, loneliness. About feeling like you're always on the edge of being good enough but never quite there. About her class. About her. Not directly, but in the spaces between the lines. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes slowed, and at the end of the 3rd page she placed the paper down, folded her hands over it, and met my gaze fully. You understand what you just did, don't you? I think so. You gave me a version of yourself you don't show anyone. I don't even know if it's a version, I said. Maybe it's the original. Her jaw tightened slightly, not out of anger, out of recognition. I've been doing this a long time, she said quietly. Reading students, challenging them. Most don't rise to the invitation. They retreat. I almost did, I admitted. But you didn't. I shook my head. Another pause. She stood, came around the desk, and leaned against it again, like she had on the first night. I'm going to submit a passing grade for you, she said. You've earned it. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But that's not why you're here. I looked up. No? I asked. No, she said, slowly removing her glasses again, folding them, setting them on the desk. You're here because you want to understand how far this goes. Her words lingered. Do you? She asked. I didn't respond. I just nodded. She didn't smile, didn't move closer. She just studied me, as if she were reading a final text, one she already knew the ending to. Then she spoke again, carefully, deliberately. You're not my student anymore. Not as of this moment. The room felt warmer somehow. What am I then? I asked. That's up to you, she said. But choose carefully, because this next step, whatever it is, doesn't come with a syllabus. We sat in silence. Not awkward silence. Charged silence. I stood. She stayed seated, head tilted slightly, watching every movement. I'll come back, I said. Her eyes didn't waver. That's not the question. I exhaled. Then what is? She leaned forward only slightly. The question is, when you do, will you still be writing something true? I didn't answer. I just picked up the folder and left the office, heart pounding, head spinning, door clicking softly behind me. I walked through the quiet hallway, past the classrooms, the lockers, the dusty posters on the walls. The building felt different now. Not smaller, not larger, just no longer academic. Like it had become something else entirely. And maybe I had too.